What's your opinion of federal judges?
My opinion of federal judges, the judiciary is a branch of the federal government established by our Constitution. It's a separate but equal branch, and it's incumbent, in my view, kind of to get to the point, I think, of the topic here today, potentially, for judges to apply the law fairly and neutrally without letting their political animus get in the way of it.
What is judicial activism?
Judicial activism is substituting your own personal views for the fair and neutral application of the law. And it's a temptation for judges of both the left and the right. It's like, oh, well, I know what the outcome of this particular case should be, and I'm going to figure out a way how to get there, using the judicial process. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. You can have a philosophy as you approach issues, but you're really supposed to fairly apply the law without regard to party or partisanship.
The Washington Post has a story about cases pending in federal courts having to do with Trump executive orders. This is the lead graph. Unions, civil rights groups, and others are squaring off in court with the Trump administration, filing roughly 140 lawsuits over the dismantling of cuts in agencies by DOJ, firings of federal employees, immigration restrictions. The challenges have blocked many of President Trump's initiatives for now, while the administration has won a few significant early victories. Does that concern you, the number of lawsuits and the number of executive actions that have been blocked via federal courts?
The number of lawsuits doesn't concern me because I recognize President Trump is engaged in an unprecedented strategy of reform that's really broad and hard to keep up with. So it's no surprise that his political opponents or people who think they're being harmed are suing. What's concerning is how many judges are kind of I'm not a lawyer, but I've enough unfortunate experience in litigation with the government, is how quickly these courts are interfering with the presidential powers, duties, and responsibilities and granting emergency relief to these individuals in ways I don't think the law allows for. So there's this almost panicked judicial decision-making that's more political than constitutional, in my view, and that's what's concerning. Everyone has a right to sue, within the law. But courts are supposed to police requests for relief that aren't really appropriate under the law. I want to sue on all sorts of things. And the lawyers will say, Tom, well, you can sue, but the question is whether you'll be successful. And the problem is, the perception is that if you're a conservative pursuing this type of claim against a Democrat administration, you would not get this reaction from the judiciary that is so helpful to the left. Now, in the end, Trump may win more than he loses, but the process is the punishment. And in my view, you have judges usurping the executive and legislative powers and pausing self-government for months based on a legal pretext to cover a political animus.
When should a federal judge be impeached and removed?
When? Well, the Constitutional envisions, obviously, impeachment for the traditional corruption, bribery, crimes. Either, ethics crimes, quite obvious ethics crimes, someone taking money for a judicial decision, or obstructing justice, the way some judges actually were accused of doing and impeached for, and removed. And the interesting thing about the impeachment power is that the founders were concerned, not the founders, but Americans were concerned about the Constitution and whether it gave the judiciary too much power. And in the Federalist Papers, they said, don't worry. If you have a judicial usurpation of the powers of the other departments or the other branches of government, the legislative or the executive, they said there are a few things. They said the judiciary is weak, really can't enforce its powers without the support of the other branches. And also you have this complete security of impeachment. So impeachment was put in there not just to check corrupt judges in the criminal sense of the word, but judges who act outside their power. And there's been really no impeachment of that nature, kind of impeachment of activist judges, as I would call it, since 1804. And there was one judge who was justice who was impeached. He wasn't removed, but there's only been impeachments for corruption since then, not on activist judges. And I think it should be discussed. If I were Jim Jordan or the House leadership, I'd be holding hearings on the impeachment power. Is it likely to result in anyone being removed? No. Even impeached? Maybe not. But I think some of the judges who have been involved here, I think you'll find, if they wanted to do a serious impeachment inquiry, a series of rulings, not just one ruling, showing that the judge is activist and doesn't respect his oath to stay within his lane, which is to make judgments based on a neutral application of the law as opposed to, basically being a politician in robes.